The little town of Silver Ridge sat cradled by winding mountain roads and endless pine forests that whispered ancient secrets to the wind. It was the kind of place where time moved slower, where the gas station still had an old rotary phone and the cashier knew every customer by name. For 10-year-old Ethan Colby, this sleepy town was both his whole world and the only world he wanted to escape. Ethan wasn't the loud, popular kid in school. He wasn't the class clown or the sports hero. He was the quiet one, always sketching in the back of the room, always watching. His best friend didn't sit beside him in class or meet him at the playground after school. His best friend had 4 legs, a black patch over one eye, and a tail that wagged like a metronome of joy. His name was Scout. Scout wasn't a purebred or a prize winner. He was a rescue, part border collie, part who knows what, with more heart in his scruffy frame than any dog Ethan had ever met. They had found each other 2 years ago on a rainy day when Ethan and his father were driving home from a failed fishing trip. A box sat by the roadside with a trembling puppy inside. Wet, abandoned, lost. "We can't just leave him," Ethan had whispered, and they hadn't. From that day on, Scout was family. Every morning, Scout would wait at the edge of the driveway, ears perked, eyes locked on the front door until Ethan came out. Every afternoon, he'd be lying in the same spot, tail thumping, as if guarding their home against the world. When Ethan cried, after his mom left, after his dad began to drink more than he talked, Scout would curl into him, resting his head on Ethan's chest, his steady breathing saying more than words ever could. On that particular morning, the sky over Silver Ridge was unusually clear, a deceptive kind of calm. Ethan had a rare smile on his face as he buckled into the passenger seat of his dad's rust-red pickup truck. They were going camping, just the two of them. No phones, no distractions, just a lake, a tent, and maybe finally some peace. Scout was in the truck bed, his head poking over the rail, wind flapping his ears as they rolled past the town limits. Ethan laughed, turning to his dad. "He looks like he's flying." His father, James Colby, smiled briefly. A real smile, not the tired one he wore lately. "He's got wings when you're watching him." It was the first good moment they'd shared in months. They drove into the mountains, past moss-covered signs and broken-down rest stops, deep into a place where the trees grew taller and the air felt wilder. The kind of place where people disappeared, into peace or into danger. They were 3 hours from home when it happened. A deer, a curve too tight, a brake too late. The truck swerved. Ethan's body slammed into the door as the vehicle lurched off the road, crashing through underbrush before tumbling into the ravine below. Scout barked, a sound cut off mid-scream as metal crunched and glass shattered. Then silence, nothing but the sound of birds scattering and the slow hiss of leaking fluid. Pain. That was the first thing. A sharp stabbing ache in his side that made breathing feel like punishment. Then the cold, damp, sticky. His vision blurred as he blinked against blood dripping from a cut above his eyebrow. The truck was on its side, the roof dented, the windshield shattered. His father wasn't moving. "Dad?" No response. "Dad?" He tried again, louder this time, his voice trembling. James Colby groaned, barely conscious, blood dripping from his forehead. His arm was twisted unnaturally, pinned between the seat and dashboard. "Scout!" Ethan twisted, wincing as his ribs screamed. The back window was gone. Scout was nowhere in sight. The fear that rose in Ethan's chest felt thicker than the air. "Scout!" Then a bark, faint but alive. Through the shattered side window, Ethan saw him, standing 10 feet away, muddy, shaking, but breathing. The moment their eyes locked, Scout whined, pawing the ground. Ethan tried to move. His seatbelt was jammed. His legs were stuck. A crushing weight pinned him in place. He wasn't going anywhere. His dad was unconscious, bleeding. The sun was already tilting westward. They were off the grid. No cell signal, no GPS, no traffic for miles. "Scout," Ethan whispered, reaching his hand as far as he could toward the broken window. "Go get help." Scout tilted his head as if unsure. "Go, boy, please, find someone." For a moment, Scout didn't move. Then something shifted in the dog's eyes, and that spark Ethan knew so well. The one that only lit when things were serious. And then he ran, out of view, out of the forest, into the unknown. Scout ran like the wind knew him by name, down the ravine, across the creek, through trees and shadows and thorns that tore at his paws. The scent of Ethan still clung to his nose, but now it mixed with something else. Urgency. Panic. Purpose. He didn't know where the humans lived, but he remembered the road, the smells, the turns. His brain worked like a map drawn in instinct and memory. He retraced the path, past the mossy stump Ethan had pointed at, past the turn where James had hummed an old country song. His paws bled. His breath grew ragged, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Back in the ravine, Ethan's breaths were growing shallower. His father stirred just once, then fell silent again. The sun had begun to disappear behind the trees, and somewhere far off a dog ran like the world depended on it. Because it did. Scout didn't know time the way humans did. He didn't count hours or measure distance in miles, but he knew Ethan's scent, and he knew danger. The wind carried whispers of urgency as he darted through the underbrush, his sides heaving with every breath. The pads of his paws were raw, sliced by thorns and sharp stones, but he kept running. The forest changed as the day slipped toward evening. Shafts of golden light pierced the canopy, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Birds quieted, crickets began their nightly chorus. And still Scout ran. A fallen tree blocked the narrow path, he remembered. He didn't hesitate. He bounded over it, landing hard but steady. A startled fox darted into the underbrush, its eyes catching Scout's for a second before vanishing. He followed the familiar scent of motor oil and dust. It was faint, nearly gone, but he pressed on. A distant sound made him stop. Water. The creek. He limped toward it, lowering his head to drink, but the moment the cool liquid hit his tongue, he stopped. Ethan was waiting. Scout turned and ran again. Back at the wreck, Ethan's world was narrowing. Pain pulsed behind his eyes, sharp and rhythmic. His throat was dry. Every breath felt like he was breathing through shards of glass. His legs were still pinned, and blood had dried sticky on his neck and cheek. The air inside the truck smelled like oil and metal and something else. Something heavier. His father hadn't moved in over an hour. "Scout," Ethan whispered, eyes fixed on the shattered window. "Please hurry." Somewhere deep in the woods, Scout faced his first real barrier. The road. It wasn't a highway, just a 2-lane stretch of cracked asphalt winding through the mountains. But to Scout, it was a roaring monster, cars speeding past in bursts of sound and wind. He waited at the edge, nose lifted, ears twitching. A truck passed, then another. He took a step forward. A horn blared. Scout jumped back. He needed to cross. The only way back to town, back to people, was on the other side. His instincts screamed at him to stay hidden, to wait, but Ethan's voice echoed in his memory. "Go get help!" Scout ran. A car screeched to a halt as he darted across, nearly clipping him. Someone shouted from inside, but Scout was already gone, disappearing into the trees on the other side. The town was still miles away, but he was closer. He ran until his legs burned. Then he walked, limping, tail low. A raccoon hissed at him from a ditch. An owl hooted above, but Scout didn't stop. He passed an old hunting shack. He passed the rusted gate where Ethan had once dropped his backpack and laughed when Scout ran off with it. Every smell was a memory. Every memory pushed him forward. Back at the wreck, night had fallen. Ethan shivered violently. His lips were cracked, his voice reduced to a whisper. "Dad, wake up." No answer. He reached out, fingers barely brushing his father's sleeve. "Please." The stars blinked above the treetops, distant and cold. He didn't want to cry anymore. He just wanted Scout to come back. Scout staggered into a clearing just outside the town limits. Lights shimmered in the distance. He picked up speed, heart pounding. He recognized the street, the gas station, the diner with the metal tables out front. And then he saw her. An older woman, maybe 60, was locking up the flower shop for the night. Scout ran straight to her, barking tail low, eyes wild with urgency. She jumped back. "What the—" He barked again, spun in a circle, barked louder. "Shoo, go on." She waved her hand. Scout whined, then darted forward, grabbed the hem of her coat and tugged. "Hey, let go!" But then she saw it, his paw, bloody, his eyes pleading. "Oh my God." She knelt, reaching for him. "Are you hurt? What happened to you?" He let go of her coat and ran a few feet toward the road, then looked back. She understood. "You want me to follow you?" A bark. She grabbed her phone, but it had no signal out here. All right, okay, show me." Scout took off, slower this time, limping heavily. She ran after him, calling out, "Wait! Wait, dog, I'm coming!" It took her 30 minutes to follow him into the forest, and she almost turned back twice. But every time she slowed, Scout would stop, look back and whine until she kept moving. Then she saw it. The truck. Crushed, on its side in the ravine. "Oh my God," she whispered, running toward it. "Is someone in there?" "Help," Ethan croaked. She scrambled down, slipping on loose dirt, grabbing at roots for balance. Her flashlight cut through the dark and found the boy's face, pale and bloodied. "Hold on, sweetheart, I'm calling for help." Her hands trembled as she dialed 911. "This is Martha Green. I'm in Silver Ridge, just off Route 18. I found a wreck, a boy's trapped, send help." Scout stood beside her, eyes fixed on Ethan, tail barely wagging. "You found him, didn't you?" she whispered to the dog. "You brought me here." Scout laid down, finally resting his head on his paws. Help arrived 20 minutes later. Firefighters and EMTs stormed the scene. Lights, voices, radios crackling. Ethan was pulled from the wreckage, barely conscious but alive. His father was unconscious but breathing. As the paramedics loaded them into ambulances, one of the officers knelt beside Scout. "This your dog?" Martha shook her head. "He found me, then led me here. He saved that boy." The officer looked at Scout, who was too tired to move. "Then he's a hero." Ethan stirred on the stretcher. "Scout," he whispered. A medic heard him. "You know the dog?" "He's mine." Scout lifted his head. Their eyes met. And for a moment everything else, the lights, the sirens, the forest, disappeared. It was just a boy and his dog, and a bond that had saved a life. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and overcooked soup. The lights were too bright, the hallways too quiet. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness for hours, tangled in wires and blankets, nurses checking monitors and scribbling notes. Every time he opened his eyes, he asked the same question, even if his voice was barely above a whisper. "Where's Scout?" The answer was always the same. "He's safe." But Ethan wanted more than that. He needed to see him. He needed to know his dog was real, that the thing he remembered wasn't a dream built from pain and fear. It wasn't until the second night that the nurse finally gave in. "He's outside," she whispered. "They wouldn't let him in, but I'll see what I can do." She returned with the security guard, an older man with tired eyes and a soft spot he rarely showed. He held the door open to the ambulance bay, and there he was. Scout. His fur was matted. One ear was bandaged. He was lying on a folded blanket with a bowl of untouched water beside him. The moment he heard Ethan's voice, even weak and slurred, Scout stood. Slowly, carefully. He limped toward the boy like he was stepping across glass. And then, nose to hand, they were together again. Ethan cried. So did the nurse. The security guard cleared his throat and looked away. Scout laid his head on Ethan's side, careful not to press against the bruises. He closed his eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. They didn't move for almost an hour. When a doctor came to check Ethan's vitals, he found them both asleep. One boy in a hospital gown and one muddy, bandaged dog curled up like a guardian angel. The story spread faster than anyone expected. It started with a nurse's photo. Then came the sheriff's press release. Local news picked it up, then regional, and by the third morning, it had gone national. Dog walk 7 miles to save trapped boy. Rescue hero, a boy, a wreck, and a dog named Scout. Silver Ridge miracle, how one dog changed everything. Ethan didn't understand the cameras or the microphones or why so many strangers suddenly wanted to talk to him. But he smiled when they asked about Scout. "He's not just a dog," he said softly. "He's my best friend." Offers started flooding in. TV interviews, book deals, dog food sponsorships, people offering money, toys, donations. The hospital had to set up a separate line to handle all the attention. But Ethan didn't care about any of that. He just wanted his dad to wake up. James Colby had suffered a concussion, several broken ribs, and a shattered arm. He hadn't spoken since the accident. Doctors were hopeful but honest. It would take time. Ethan visited his room every day. Scout came too. They sat in silence beside the bed, Ethan tracing patterns on his dad's hand while Scout laid on the floor, eyes always alert. On the 6th day it happened. A cough, a groan, then a whisper. "Ethan." The boy looked up, eyes wide. "Dad?" James turned his head slowly, painfully. His eyes found his son's. And then he saw the dog. "You made it," he breathed. Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Scout saved us." James smiled, weak but real. "That's my boy." The nurse called for the doctor, but Ethan barely heard her. He was too busy gripping his father's hand like he'd never let go. Scout thumped his tail once. The following week, the mayor of Silver Ridge held a ceremony in front of the town hall. Scout wore a custom-made vest with a patch that read "Local Hero." Ethan stood beside him, a little stronger each day. The mayor gave a speech. The sheriff told the story. And when the applause came, Scout barked just once, as if to say, "All right, that's enough." Someone laughed, and the town fell in love with him all over again. A bronze plaque was placed outside the veterinary clinic in honor of Scout, who reminded us all what loyalty looks like. Ethan didn't say much during the ceremony, but when they handed him the microphone, he held it in both hands and said quietly, "He didn't just save my life, he saved my heart." No one clapped at first, because everyone was crying. That night, back at home for the first time since the accident, Ethan and Scout lay curled up on the couch. The house still smelled like dust and old coffee, but it felt different now. Warmer. Alive. Ethan looked at his dog. "I know you can't talk," he said, "but I hope you know what you mean to me." Scout licked his hand, and that was enough. Months passed. The snow came early that year, blanketing Silver Ridge in soft silence. The roads were quieter, the town slower, and the Colby house, for the first time in a long while, felt like home again. James had returned to work part-time at the hardware store. He still wore a brace on his arm, but his steps were steady, his eyes brighter. Every afternoon he'd come home and find Ethan and Scout in the backyard, building forts, racing each other, sitting by the fire pit, watching the sky fade into dusk. Scout had healed too. The cuts, the limp, the bandages, moans, all gone. But something in him had changed. He was more protective now, more aware. He never let Ethan out of his sight. Not at night, not in the woods, not ever again. Ethan didn't mind. He liked the quiet now. He liked the way Scout's paws sounded against the porch, the way his tail tapped the floor during movies, the way he sighed in his sleep like an old man with nothing left to prove. Some nights Ethan would sit on his bed and just watch him breathe. "You're my miracle," he'd whisper, and Scout would lift one sleepy eye, then nuzzle closer. They didn't need words. One weekend in early spring, a woman from a national magazine came to interview them. She wore heels too tall for mountain roads and a scarf that kept getting caught in tree branches. But she was kind and curious. She asked Ethan the usual questions. "How did you feel when the crash happened? What do you remember about Scout's rescue? What do you want to be when you grow up?" Ethan thought about that one. "I think I want to help dogs, like Scout. Maybe train them to help people like he helped me." The woman smiled. "That's a beautiful answer." James stood behind them, arms crossed, pride in his eyes. "Told you he's special." The article went viral. Again. A week later, they received an envelope with a stamp from Washington, D.C. Inside was a letter from the president's office, a formal invitation. Scout was to receive the Medal of Animal Valor, an award rarely given, reserved for extraordinary animals who demonstrated acts of courage, sacrifice, and loyalty. The ceremony was held at the Capitol. Ethan wore a suit for the first time in his life. Scout had a new collar with silver threading that shimmered in the sunlight. James stood beside them, tears threatening to break his proud expression as the award was read aloud. Scout didn't understand the applause, but when Ethan knelt beside him, whispering, "You did this," the dog wagged his tail and leaned in, pressing his head against Ethan's chest. It was enough. When they returned to Silver Ridge, something unexpected waited for them in the mail. A scholarship offer from a foundation dedicated to service animals. It would cover Ethan's future education if he chose to study veterinary science or K-9 training. James handed it to his son with a trembling hand. "This is yours. You earned it." Ethan looked at Scout. "We earned it." Time passed. Ethan grew taller, his voice deeper. Scout's muzzle turned silver at the edges, his steps slower, but their bond remained untouched. They were inseparable. The town never stopped talking about them. Children pointed when they passed. Elderly couples asked to pet Scout's head. Local artists painted murals. A park trail was renamed the Scout Run. And every year on the anniversary of the rescue, Ethan and his dad would hike back to the old ravine, now marked with a wooden sign that read, "Here, loyalty ran 7 miles to save a life." They'd stand in silence. Scout would sniff the air, tail gently wagging. Ethan would lay down a single white flower. One year, when Scout could no longer climb the trail, Ethan carried him, all the way up, step by step, breath by breath, because that's what you do for someone who once saved your world. Scout passed away quietly the following winter. He was 13. Ethan held him in his arms on the living room floor, whispering thank yous through tears, stroking his fur until the very end. The town held a candlelight vigil. Letters poured in from all over the country. And in the park, beside the statue they'd once erected, a new line was etched beneath his name. He didn't wear a badge. He didn't carry a weapon, but he was a hero all the same. Ethan never forgot, and neither did the world, because once upon a time in the middle of nowhere a boy was trapped, and a dog walked 7 miles to save him. Sometimes the strongest rescue doesn't come with sirens or flashing lights. Sometimes it comes on 4 legs, tired, bleeding, but refusing to give up. Scout didn't know medals. He didn't need applause. All he knew was that his boy needed help. In a world that often forgets what loyalty means, this little dog walked 7 miles to remind us all. So if you ever doubt the power of love, remember this story and the paw prints that led the way to hope. Because heroes come in all shapes, but some of them just happen to wag their tails